Durban University of Technology's bonus grant case study is entitled Implementing, Evaluating and Impacting, Building Institutional Capacity Towards a Data-Informed Culture for Student Success.
The Kresge Foundation offered the Siyaphumelela partners the opportunity to bid for a bonus grant, which would either scale up or develop further particular project aims. Now at DUT, part of our project aim was really to consider our entire data infrastructure. We were in a situation of very disparate sources and streams of data that resided in very disparate spaces. There was limited access to student data in particular, and certainly not easy access to that data, usually having to be mediated through various offices to obtain the data. And then we also had a consideration about the capacity of our staff to work with data in a meaningful way towards student success. So essentially the purpose of our project was to build a data-informed culture at the university through developing institutional capacity to access, work with, and understand data towards student success, and that this would be supported by an appropriate and integrated data infrastructure, which includes a student tracking system.
This cube depicts the framework or the model that we developed as we went through the project. We didn't consider any particular methodology or theoretical framework at the outset of our project, as we considered that this was a series of activities towards the ultimate aim. However, as we progressed through the project, we found various models and frameworks that helped to inform our work, which we developed to develop this particular cube, which we call our Implementing, Evaluating and Impacting cube. We'll be using this cube as the backdrop against which we arrange our case study, and as we unfold this for your interest. And we will start with the implementing face of the cube, working from the top, namely from the policy considerations all the way down to the infrastructure. Thereafter, we go on to the evaluating face of the cube, and finally, we finish off with the impact face of the cube. So, if we start with implementing, this obviously is the considerations around which we implemented and how we implemented the project. Starting with policy, we actually begin our conversation focused on the university's strategic direction, and we draw from the university's strategic plan to indicate the centrality of student success and the use of data as evidenced in that plan.
Our plan is really a two-stranded DNA, centered on, founded on student-centeredness and engagement at its core. And then we have 4 strategic focus areas, which unpacks into some strategic objectives and drivers. So if you don't know that, just focus on the student-centeredness and engagement. So the reason why that part is in green, because out of the 4 strategic focus areas, the first one is building sustainable student communities of living and learning. All the objectives there really has to deal with students. And that is why I've highlighted that in green. So provide enabling and accessible living and learning environments that promote student success, all the way down to deepen the innovative use of technology and improve the quality of learning, teaching and assessment, all has to do with students. And if you get to the next one, you can always weave in students in building research and innovation for development, because you can't do without students, but really focusing on undergraduate students within the Siyaphumelela project. But if you get to the strategic focus area 3, building a learning organization, a term which is very often misunderstood, because people think because we are a university, we are a learning organization. No, we might be an institution of learned people, but not necessarily a learning organization. So the first and the third one focus on students. Foster among people shared values, collegiality. And if you look at the third one, a culture of monitoring and evaluation to advance the university's effectiveness. And I will show you later how the project helped us to actually achieve that. And then on the fourth one, use technology more effectively and innovatively to enhance all aspects of the university's business. And what you've been seeing in the last 2 days or so, and perhaps you'll see more tomorrow as well, is how we're using big data technology to really understand the problems that we are faced with.
When implementing, you need to focus on incentives. You need to have incentives so that staff find it rewarding. If you do not have incentives, then staff will be resistant to any change. So the way we implemented our incentives was that we linked our training to their professional practice and their professional development. Our student success task team workshops were interesting and fun, and staff ended up looking forward to them each term. The focus of the training was on applying the data in their workplace. The focus was on making tasks easier and time efficient, rather than creating additional work for lecturers. A further incentive was around automating routine reports so that staff would not have to reproduce the same reports when PowerHeater would be able to automate it. In an institution that looks at student-centeredness, we found our lecturers were really incentivized in order to produce the best work for the students, in order to get the students to pass and succeed. This mindset is crucial when trying to incentivize staff to do additional work in order to make sure and enable students to succeed.
Training staff to work with data was a great first step in building a data culture. But to get people to use data and develop those skills and encourage more people to work with data, we have to build communities of practice. And this was something we were very aware of right at the outset, and it was an objective of our bonus grant from the start. One of the most important ways we tried to build communities of practice around data work was through our student success task teams, both in terms of its composition and the workshops that we ran. Regarding the composition of the student success task team, we had representation from across the DUT. We had academic representation, and these were faculties. We had lecturers on board. We had, in some cases, faculty deans who were part of our student success task team. And then in terms of admin, in terms of student support, student academic support, we had a whole range of representation. We had the registrar's office, we had student counseling, the library, writing center, student housing. And so staff were very well represented. We also had a very good student representation. We had our SRC represented, and in almost every student success task team workshop, we had the SRC there, or SRC reps. And then we had an individual student who works with our student food security project, and that was Sponisu. And now about our student success task team workshops. They always had a data focus. So we might begin with data, a presentation of data to provide context, data as a backdrop. But very quickly, we moved to the participants actually working with the data and using the data and applying the data, to come up with recommendations, actionable steps. Our workshops were not talk shops. They were workshops in every sense of the word, and always with a data application focus. The other thing also is that although we had our standard student success task team, what we did was we invited other people to our workshops depending on the theme of the workshop. So if we felt that we needed, first year lecturers because we were looking at first year data, we then went out and we invited the right staff to attend the workshops. And in this way, we had the right people there who could make meaningful contributions to the deliberations at the workshops. A second community of practice was through our Data Jedi. So who are our Data Jedi? No, they don't include OB, and they don't go around looking like that. But like the Star Trek Jedi, our data Jedi had to have certain skills. And for most of them, it was Excel skills, and several others had SPSS and a few other data skills. So the data Jedi were appointed through the faculties. We had 7 data Jedi in total, 1 for each faculty and 1 for Gen Ed. Each of the data Jedi had to be approved by their respective heads of departments or their deans. And so there were staff that worked in the faculty. They were known by the other people in the faculty, and in that way they represented the faculty. The data Jedi were the go-to person for data work in the faculty. So whereas they did do focus on Siyaphumelela data work, they also conducted data work for the faculty depending on what the deans actually wanted. And the idea was for the data Jedi, the academic development practitioner, and the quality promotions officer, where these positions existed, of course, in the faculties, to work together as a team. We also have a data working group which formed a third community of practice. And this group was represented by ITSS, of course, Management Information, Institutional Planning, and the Library. And this group actually were instrumental in delivering the data warehouse, in acquiring PowerHeater as the platform for the data warehouse. And, you know, if I think about it, actually implementing this entire bonus grant project. Apart from these formal communities of practice, in other words, our Student Success Task Team, our Data Jedi, and our Data Working Group, we had several less formal or informal communities of practice developing around groups in faculties, around individual lecturers in some cases. And some of these were drawn from staff who had attended our Excel data training, and they've indicated that they would love to learn more. We've also have lots of lecturers coming on board with AutoScholar and learning how to track student progress in AutoScholar. Of course, the academic advisors now especially will become quite an important community of practice going forward. And so, you know, apart from the formal communities of practice, we have all these informal communities of practice developing. And so we are very excited about this group growing and developing in future. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is our biennial institutional research conference. This year, we rebranded it as DUT Data Day, and it was a very exciting event. And this actually showed us that we are really developing communities of practice around data work. The DUT Data Day was an opportunity for staff to showcase the way in which they use data in their respective environments. And here you see a gallery walk actually of all the various activities that we conducted over the 4 years in our Student Success Task Team workshops, and a few other workshops we ran outside the formal Student Success Task Team workshops. In terms then of how we implemented building our communities of practice, if I can call it that. Our Student Success Task Teams, our Data Jedis, we had a very regular, what we call a regular cadence of accountability, and that's in the 4 disciplines of execution, the 4DX methodology. So with these Student Success Task Teams, our regular workshops, 4 times a year, or when we had the conference 3 times a year, the Data Jedis, we met very regularly, once a month, sometimes more often if it was close to a workshop and they were involved in the workshop. So having that regular interaction, I think, is very important in building a community of practice. Apart from that, having the right people involved, so with the Data Jedis, the fact that they were appointed, with the approval of the deans, that they were staff members within the faculties, that was a good success factor. The fact that we invited or maybe co-opted people whom we thought were the right people, to our workshops and things, all help to build communities of practice. And then finally, sometimes if the formal doesn't work, it's okay. Don't sweat it. Let it happen. Let it develop organically or naturally with the more informal ways. And I think that's what we found actually has worked a lot better. Having maybe smaller meetings, smaller groups, and this groundswell, from the bottom, this groundswell of development of communities of practice. So yeah, that's how we build communities of practice. The overriding goal of our Siyaphumelela bonus grant project is to build a data culture at DUT. And to achieve this, staff must be equipped with the skills to use data meaningfully. We had several types of data training workshops. The majority were in Excel and AutoScholar. We also had a data training workshop that integrated statistics, SPSS, and Excel during our DUT Data Day, and this was run by one of our data Jedis. Then in October this year, we had several Power Heater user training workshops that were run by the vendors IDSC. In total, therefore, we had about 15 data training workshops over the past 2 years. All our data training workshops focused on improving professional practice. In other words, our training aimed to help people do their work more effectively at DUT. For academics, learning how to bulk upload marks in Excel onto ITS is something that would be very useful, especially for lecturers who teach large class sizes. We also involved the newly appointed lecturers who were undergoing induction in our training, so they would be equipped with the skills right at the outset. Then in engineering, DUT worked closely with the AutoScholar developer to develop a facility that was able to track student attainment of exit level outcomes. This is something that the Engineering Council of South Africa wants, and it basically is linked to the accreditation status. So this was a first for South Africa, and we are very proud of this. Having an automated system for tracking exit level outcomes in engineering is very exciting, and we are actually hoping to extend this to tracking the DUT graduate attributes in other programs as well. AutoScholar is used for tracking student progress and identifying at-risk students early on. And we now have lecturers in other faculties having come on board, learning how to use this, and we are training lecturers in that. And then, of course, with most recently, our academic advisors being appointed through the UCDG, this is training that we are actually going to be continuing and developing and using a lot more in future. In terms of improving professional practice, we had several admin and admin support staff attending our training workshops. Now, these staff work mainly with quantitative data in Excel, and they have to do things like exam board reporting, academic quality monitoring. So learning how to use Excel, pivots to do graphs, to summarize data would be a skill that would actually be very, very useful in their everyday jobs. And apart from staff, training staff in data work, we also had one lecturer who piloted the use of AutoScholar with students. And so since we're going to be having academic advisors, and the academic advising project is going to be something that's going to be rolled out more extensively next year, we're going to see a lot more training now of students working with AutoScholar. I also want to mention that prior to running the Excel training workshops, we conducted a skills audit. And based on this, we planned the content of the workshops. So what the skills audit basically showed us that we needed to run very introductory, basic Excel training, and then we scaled it up to intermediate training. And this was something that really worked because we were able to identify the gaps, the skill gaps, and then meet the gaps in terms of our training. Finally, all the Excel training used actual data that was housed on the SharePoint, and this was the management information repository of historical data. But the important thing is that the training used real data. It was real student data. It was relevant data. So, we didn't run training where we used hypothetical data sets. This was data that the academic staff could identify with. It was their students' data. It was their module performance data. And I think this is something that made the training very effective and very relevant as well. In terms then of the way we implemented our data training workshops, the key success factors were, firstly, focusing on improving professional practice. Secondly, conducting a needs analysis to ensure that the training meets the needs of the staff. And thirdly, making the training relevant and interesting to staff by using data that they are familiar with, using their student data.
Thanks, Rajan and Prabhashni. Please, can you share how DUT went about implementing the infrastructure components?
Thanks, Ashton. Then firstly, we need to look at that a data warehouse was recognized in 2018 as a university strategic priority which was accompanied with the necessary funding. And it had three aims. I think the first one was basically to provide an authoritative source of integrated data, facilitate better access to information by a broader population of the university users, and I think finally to provide a basis for evidence-based decision making. So Creativity Bonus, the grant, also contributed to support the data infrastructure, the integration and the data warehousing requirements of DUT, with the aim of improving student success through the effective use of data. DUT lacked the infrastructure and capacity to develop its own data warehouse. Hence, we invited vendors to demonstrate and provide a data warehouse solution. Joining 21 of the other South African higher education institutions in South Africa, executive management approved the IDSC's Power Header as a basis for DUT's data warehouse. The hardware for the data warehouse, consisting of a single server, was integrated into the existing ITSS data center infrastructure. We had an implementation plan which was agreed between both parties, which was managed by the implementation task team, and implementation was completed in 29 days. The Management Information Department has been restructured, and the approval of a database analyst post will provide the necessary expertise with regard to the maintenance of the data warehouse and the business analytics skills. Thank you.
In the success factors of the data warehouse, as Rajan said, that we had got the proposal approved for a data warehouse, and then what we've done was that we had demonstrations, and that's how Power Header was chosen for the data warehouse. So the first thing we had to do was get an implementation team together. So we've had key personnel from ITSS as well as MI in the implementation team. Once we've decided on that, then we set up to advertise and get a dedicated project leader, manager actually, for this project. So we've done that, and that was one of the success factors. Once we've done that, then we've decided we're only going to take 3 modules. We're not going to bite off more than we can chew. So we chose 3 modules, and we decided to work on that. So between ITSS as well as IDSC and the project manager, they had a list of tasks that were set out for them, and weekly, daily emails and reports were going back and forth so we could set up the data warehouse and have everything on board. We're not onto cloud just yet, but we could be one of the first institutions to go onto cloud. So that's very promising for now. So what else we've done was that we've decided to use historical data for reporting purposes, audited historical data, and for the current information, we decided to use the information that's on our operating system, that's ITS, for 2019.
Maybe just to add to that, I think the one part is like the success factor that I'm not sure what you included was the limited choice of modules that we took from past IDSC. So that contributed to that. And also there was this regular cadence of the monthly meetings with the PWG where we provided feedback in terms of implementation. And finally, I would think the success would have been attributed to the so we had an implementation task team that monitored the implementation within that phase. So I think those are basically critical main things.
Yeah, and I think ITSS was a key role players. Had we not had them on board,
Support.
And the support, and I think it was just incredible from their side.
So the best is to start small, always involve all stakeholders, important stakeholders, get buy-in from top management. And very important is that you include ITSS in your deployments. Also, the lessons learned is to take recommendations from IDSC. They have some good recommendations, and use them.
We use our cube model to describe the implementation, evaluation, and impact of our bonus grant project. In the cube, 4 requirements are given for creating a data-driven culture within an organization. Solidify the data set, strengthen the skill set, sharpen the tool set, and shift the mindset.
We have then decided to develop a few dashboards, not a whole lot. So we developed about 6 dashboards. Then we've had training, we had administrator training, 2 administrator training for 8 staff from the library, from the planning office, MI, as well as ITSS. And then from there we launched Power Healer at the DUT Data Day to showcase what it's all about. And we've got very positive feedback from that. Then we were invited to the Power Healer user group training that was held in Potchefstroom, and we got to meet other institutions, and we did a presentation there to show how far we've come, and everyone was pretty excited. So the new institutions that are going to come on board want to actually benchmark and use DUT, how our implementation plan going forward for their institutions. From the DUT Data Day, we had a whole lot of departments, faculties requesting training. So we've had training, successful training for 40 staff members. And at the moment, we have like over 60 people that have registered on Power Healer and are using it. So that's what we've done thus far.
Thanks for sharing about the training. Can you also share how successful we have been in solidifying the data set and how the project has contributed to the knowledge outcome?
We've decided initially is to actually use audit data and for historical reporting and current real-time data from our ERP system to report on current data. So I think that's basically where we've agreed upon to use the data, and I'm sure, like, I mean, in terms of moving forward, we'd like to look at showcasing and doing road shows, like, I mean, with the product, and also, like, I mean, for people to start understanding data as well. Okay, I think with regard to the provision of data by the Management Information Department, people have begun to have trust with the data that we provide them, and we don't have anyone that actually questions data that comes out from the Management Information Department.
How important is it to have a single source of data that can be trusted?
Wow, I think, like, I mean, look at it, I think basically at this point in time we had this disintegrated data and data lying across all different departments. The issue was, like, I mean, we had to make sure that we bring all the data and integrate them into the data warehouse so that we can have one source of the truth. So at this point in time, we've got the ITS data, and we're hoping to bring, and we've got the ValPack from our HEMAS reporting data, and we're hoping to bring information from other areas into the data warehouse that we could report on. And once we have the data, and we have to go through a staging process and to make sure that the data is cleaned, and we have one form of reporting to make sure that that's one version of the truth.
And I think just to add, everyone has data in silos, and we will try and avoid that. So we want to have access to everyone to have access to data wherever they want, whenever they want the data. So breaking down the silos is the first step.
Strengthen the skill set of our DUT staff. Our data training workshops encompass training in Excel, AutoScholar, SPSS, and Power Healer. About 150 staff in total attended the various training workshops. To begin with, the majority of participants rated our data training workshops highly. 84% of participants said the workshops were very useful for data work, and a further 12% found them useful. The content of the workshops was designed to meet the participants' skill levels, bridge the skills gaps, and introduce new tools and techniques for working with data. Here we have feedback on the relevance of the data training workshops to participants' jobs at DUT. Our training focused on improving professional practice. 93% of participants believed the training to be very relevant or relevant to their work. Some of the feedback included comments such as, "I am responsible for reporting data for student development. I can now integrate Excel in the support work I do." And from another participant, "I did immensely benefit from this workshop, not only as an academic staff, but also as a teacher. I know I have a holistic idea of working with the Excel program." This third set of evaluation feedback considers the relevance of the training workshops to student success in general. Again, over 90% of workshop participants believed the workshops to be very relevant or relevant. Given that the majority of our participants were academics and academic support staff, this result shows they recognize the importance of their own data skills and capacities to the student success work they do. This is very encouraging, since one of the goals of the Siyaphumelela project is to promote data-informed decisions and actions. We intend to continue with the various data training workshops in 2020 to improve the skill set of our staff. Strengthening the skill set of our DUT staff is important, but if we want to entrench a data culture, then it is critical to foster and build communities of practice using and applying data in their decisions and actions. In the CUBE model, we understand toolset to refer to our DUT staff and our communities of practice. So in this video, I am going to speak about our efforts and experiences in sharpening our toolset or building communities of practice around data work at DUT. Our Student Success Task Team was a very strong community of practice. Membership included staff from across the university and the SRC. Our quarterly workshops involved hands-on activities working with and applying data. Depending on our workshop theme, we routinely invited other staff and students to attend if they were key role players and could contribute meaningfully. For example, we invited our Student Services Board to a workshop on holistic student support. This helped build our community of practice, and because of the data-focused nature of our workshops, also encourage a data culture at the university. The 7 data Jedi who were appointed were a very cohesive community of practice themselves. The regular interactions, the common focus in terms of the Siyaphumelela data work, and the range of diverse skills all contributed to achieving this. However, the integration of the Jedi in their respective faculties had varied success. In some of the larger faculties, the Jedi was almost overloaded with faculty-related data work, including collecting and capturing data, although their role was to analyze and interpret data. In other faculties, the teamwork which we envisaged between the Jedi, the academic development practitioner, and the quality officer did not happen smoothly. In most cases, however, the Jedi's involvement with and contribution to faculty data work was successful. Further, all the Jedi reported at Faculty Board, and the majority at Faculty Exco at the invitation of the faculty deans. So a critical factor impacting the Jedi's ability to build communities of practice around data work within their respective faculties is the involvement of the dean. A very successful community of practice is the Data Working Group, which was responsible for delivering the data warehouse solution. Newly emerging and hence less formal communities of practice are developing, which show great promise. These include academic advisors, working with our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, AutoScholar, staff who will use PowerHeader, and those who have attended and will be attending future data training workshops. Our efforts to build communities of practice around data work were evident at our Data Day event, at which we launched PowerHeader and AutoScholar officially. We had 30 data exhibits from across the university, including our faculties and various student services, student support, and other administrative support divisions. We had a lot of fun organizing the 2019 DUT Data Day, and we look forward to planning future events to showcase the work of our growing communities of practice as we continue building a data culture at DUT.
The main challenges to becoming a data-focused organization is not technology, but rather people and processes. At DUT, this is a problem with which we are still engaging. We saw through the Siyaphumelela project to shift the university to a data-led mindset in various ways. Within the academic ambit, one approach was the appointment of the data Jedis in each of the 6 faculties. They also assisted their faculty with other data work as needed. We also endeavored to role model the data culture through our quarterly Student Success Task Team workshops and other presentations that we made at various advisory boards at the university. We rebranded our biennial institution research conference in 2019 as DUT Data Day, with a focus on how DUT uses data to drive student success and improve organizational efficiency. We obtained feedback from staff and students who attended DUT Data Day on the 28th and 29th of August on their perceptions regarding the extent to which mindset has changed over the last 3 years. Specifically, we asked the question, to what extent do you think there's been a change in the use of data to support decision-making and planning over the last 3 years in your personal practice? You can see from the graph that there's a huge shift, with most of the respondents replying 4 or 5, where 5 is very much and 1 is not at all. When asked, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not at all and 5 is very much, to what extent do you think there has been a change in the use of data to support decision-making and planning over the last 3 years at various levels, being executive management, your faculty division, your department, and your personal practice? The graph shows that roughly 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 respondents were unable to comment regarding culture change at executive management and faculty division levels, respectively. This indicates that more work needs to be done by the respective groups in advocating for and practicing data-informed decisions and actions. At the same time, it is good to see that at least 33% in your faculty division or more of the respondents rated 4 to 5 on the scale. In this regard, 43% of respondents perceived an increased use of data to support decision-making at executive management level. We view this as a very positive indicator of shifting mindset. Executive sponsorship has been identified as a key determinant of building a data culture. Our executive and our Vice Chancellor, Prof. Tanda Mtembu in particular, is very focused on evidence-led decision-making. He leads by example and is driving this, painfully slow in some instances, through his executives. We also take note that perceptions of a mind shift towards data-informed decision and action is more pronounced at departmental and individual levels, with respondents rating 4 or 5 on this question. Further, 72% of respondents said that they use data very much or always in their daily work. 88% believe that proficiency in a relevant data software would help them in their daily work, and all were in favor of appropriate training and upskilling in using data. This indicates a groundswell of change taking place at lower levels of the university, and together with the executive buy-in, we are optimistic of shifting mindsets slowly but surely. Earlier, we stated that our ultimate aim through the bonus grant project was to build a data-led culture at DUT. Attendees at DUT Data Day were asked to reflect on the extent to which the Siyaphumelela project was seen as a driver of this mindset. Responses from the diverse group of participants indicate that almost half think that the Siyaphumelela project at DUT has been a significant driver of data culture over the past 3 years, with another 23% giving a rating of 3. However, the 23% who said they do not know is a source of concern. This is something of which the staff directly involved in implementing the project need to be aware of and address going forward, if indeed we are to ultimately achieve our bonus grant project aim.
We've looked at implementation, evaluation, and we now get to the third and final section of our case study, namely that of the impact. And there are 3 considerations under the impacting face of our cube, namely knowing, doing, and transforming. And I think for the first time in this case study, we actually include our student voice, which is not to say that our students haven't been involved. I think you have heard earlier about our communities of practice and our student success task team workshops and various other projects where our students are involved. But here we have the direct voice of a student talking about what kind of data we need to know our students.
Internationally, intentionality and advocacy with respect to student-centeredness and success is real high impact. It's not easily measurable, but it's high impact. We still have a long way to go, but the worldviews and culture are changing, and that's pretty evident in the way when we listen to the language of the people, language of the lecturers, and so forth. We are problem-centered. So in my field, we don't like to say we are solution-centered because we have great solutions for the wrong problem. So we really want to be problem-centered because we believe if you really understand the problem, you've actually solved the problem. The third point is that advocacy for data-based, evidence-based practice is dominant at DUT. We are in the habit of making decisions based on data and based on research output. And if there's something that's very complicated, like our language policy, we've started a research project that's going to be running into quite significant amounts of money in developing our policy coming out of that research. And then finally, student success is a very complex, messy problem. And so we have moved at DUT from what we call single loop learning, which is learning just from doing actions and seeing what happens, really into what Argyris and Schoon calls double loop learning, where we question the fundamental assumptions, we question the belief systems, and we make decisions and we theorize based on that, and we have improvement interventions based on that. It brings about a serious transformation and sometimes a paradigm revolution. And then the ultimate, of course, is to get a triple loop learning, where we start, it's kind of meta-learning, where we want to learn about how we are learning. And I think when we get to that stage, we've really evolved to really understanding the problem, and I think the solutions will flow out of that. So that, Chair, is a nutshell of the progress at DUT.
In terms of how we should be collecting data and how that data should be used in ensuring that students are assisted and they succeed. Yesterday we had a presentation with a challenge of food security, and from everyone seated here or gathered here, we all agree that food security is a problem. So how do we address this thing? I think we've ignored our alumni or our graduates, those who have graduated, in terms of tracking them as to check where they are they employed, what type of employment have they secured, how much they can come back and contribute into our campuses. And also looking at the enrollment forecast as to designing clear programs that will speak to first generation students who come to campus, because you would find that majority of our students would be working students, you know, having the challenges of understanding that in order for you to be accepted or to be admitted in a university, you have to apply the year before so that you will be assessed and be offered space accordingly. So majority of our students are working students, and to understand the enrollment focus would then translate to the ability of the university in ensuring that they create platforms or programs that will speak to addressing issues that those students might face. Because as part of the SRC, we have our SRC subcommittees, which translate to about 50 people who come on campus during, immediately after the basic education have released the results for students. Then they would approach campus and assist us in terms of welcoming those students who do not even know a direction to a particular department or something like that. Then the last one would be evaluation forms. The way that those things are issued to us as students is incorrect, because you are asked at the end of the semester or towards the end of the semester in saying evaluate the lecturer who was delivering the content to you. But the problem is that those evaluations should have at least been offered at the beginning of the year with a question to a student, or a piece of paper be given to a student to say, what do you expect from me as a lecturer that will enhance your learning and ensuring that you succeed as a student? In that way, it creates a platform where a lecturer would understand the student's position and be able to align whatever that is prepared as a content for the student to be delivered in that particular program or module. Yeah.
Moving to the next step of the doing in our impacting face of the model, we obviously here had to draw upon what we knew, and we've had a brief synopsis from an executive manager and a student as to the components of knowing and the actions that might be required or what we might need to have done. In particular, the considerations around doing for this bonus grant project focused very clearly on providing or improving the data landscape of the institution. But in that process, there were particular actions and outcomes that resulted. And I think in particular, we've got that of breaking silos. And by this, I mean that we had departments from across the university working together. You've already heard previously that the data working group that was instrumental in driving the project comprised staff from our IT division, from our management information department, from the library, and from institutional planning. That very process of bringing these respective departments into a project like that meant that we started chipping away at silos. But the work of this went beyond just the data working group. We've already alluded to the various communities of practice that were established or started growing out of this bonus grant project. And that certainly, again, helped to break down silos across the institution, and in particular, to make everybody understand that student success is everyone's responsibility. It doesn't just reside in the classroom, but it becomes everybody's responsibility. The doing component also focused on doing things differently. So it was by no means business as usual in terms of usual university calendar events, such as our institutional research conference, which we normally have every second year. We decided to take a completely different approach this year by having an exhibition of data in a way that we could evidence data and understand the different data sets that are available at the university and to consider how we could use this. So a very strong component of the doing was really about advocating for the data-led decision-making and the impact that this would then have on our institutional culture. How do we know that there has been some transformation and some impact of this data project at the university? Well, one instance is the recognition of the project, and specifically that related to the data analytics capacity training, which has been described in some length earlier in this case study. At the 2018 Council Awards that were held recently, whereby this particular project of building data capacity was made in the category of a project or intervention that makes meaningful steps towards enabling a more socially inclusive staff and student body. And this award is made in recognition of how this work is affecting change at the university. This is something that really excites us, the recognition that this is starting to happen, and in particular the recognition that it is this particular initiative that has made strides towards changing the culture at the university, and that the data component is seen as being effective through the interventions that are being implemented towards enabling a more socially inclusive environment at the university. As we come to the end of our case study, I'd like to paraphrase the words of our Vice-Chancellor when he was asked about what he thought the impact of the Siphumelele data project was on the university. And he says that this has opened a number of avenues. For example, the use of data analytics in other areas of DUT, which were exposed at the DUT Data Day, where we saw that there are many, many other data sets that exist in the university, and we need to get to understand how we could use these more productively in transforming the university. I believe that this has really been the impact of this data project and how it is beginning to transform the university in all its operations, in the way it works, in the way it makes its decisions, and most particularly in the way it supports its students. Finally, in conclusion, we wish to thank the Kresge Foundation for their support and for inviting DUT to be part of the broader Siyaphumelela project, but then equally for the opportunity for this bonus grant project, which we have been describing. We believe that this has opened a number of avenues, but beyond embedding Siyaphumelela in the university and making it part and parcel of our operations and of our thinking and of the way in which we do things, we see benefits beyond the student success with data analytics. We see that this is also about getting involved with our partner institutions to sharing our experiences and our practices and to improving the whole South African higher education system. Given the historical backlog that exists, we believe that there's a huge transformation opportunity here, and we look forward to being part of the big picture.